I know a little bit about your upbringing, being in a very artistic family. Your mother was a puppeteer, your father was an illustrator, and did a lot of that, I imagine, influence you generally speaking, and specifically towards this book?
Yeah, absolutely. My mom is a Henson trained puppeteer. She's an art therapist now. My dad was a cartoonist and animator, so it worked itself out that I would be doing something of that. It was a very encouraging household to be growing up in. As far as history is concerned, though, just growing up around old things in New England, that sort of came naturally just from the environment.
So can you go in, that's fascinating. Can you go a little more into that? What were some of the things that in New England really had an impact on you?
Well, I mean, it was just, I grew up in a very small fishing village north of Boston, in a place called Cape Ann. The town of Rockport.
Is this a problem?
I don't think so. I think it adds to the ambiance.
I'm so sorry
It's a busy
to interrupt,
con.
but no, I just
You're
want to
wonderful.
make
Thank you.
sure. Okay,
Yeah.
go ahead and start over. Sorry.
Oh, no. I grew up in a very small fishing village north of Boston, the town of Rockport, and about 30 minutes north of Salem. So the field trips would always be, in middle school, would always be going to the local museums and things like that. We'd go up to Salem, and that's when I first encountered the darker sides of Salem history that kind of influenced this book.
Was it a bit of a rude awakening growing up, learning American history in one way, and then going to a place where it happened to be a particularly intense time in American history and learning about that isolated from everything else?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the core themes of this book is that history doesn't happen in a vacuum, that it happens in our backyards, and if you just peel away the surface layers, everything is built up, and if you dig deep enough, and if you care, you're going to find just a wealth of things that no one else has really bothered to work with before. And I think growing up, it was just a very encouraging place to do that. I mean, I started learning about the Salem witch trials in my middle school that was in Danvers. So it was pretty much at the heart, it was ground zero for where all of this began, because Danvers used to be Salem Village. So, and my middle school was a 17th century farmhouse that would have been in existence. So it was the proper setting, and then the nearest places to go with field trips was wax museums in Salem. So a bit of the tangible with the history and the walking tours and things like that.
Did you get to go and do a lot of in-person reference, and when you were doing the art for this, did you go to a lot of places physically and copy specific locations, or was it just sort of because this was your upbringing, this is all part of the core of who you are and your artistic vision already?
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to do not just the events and timeline accurately for this book, but I also wanted the topography to be correct. I wanted to look at maps and drive through these areas and go, okay, yeah, there's a river that goes through here. There would have been a bridge. This would have, the map is different from here, and to really just create a book where you could take the book and go to these locations and it would come alive, and like I said, it didn't happen in a vacuum. It had an actual location, an actual site, because we've mythologized this event so much over decades.
And I hear you have an excellent map maker. Can you tell me a little bit about her?
Yeah, my wife Mariana did all the maps. Mariana Ivenovich, she's brilliant, and she. She's wonderful. She's brilliant, and she volunteered to do the maps when I was just so strapped and just trying to finish the book, and I had no time.
No, that leads me to a story that I heard about some of the late night work that you were doing, that she would come in and see you doing. Can you tell us a little bit about some of those late night, hard working, grueling nights where you were just Go, go, go.
The book became such an obsession that it was a thing I could not work on. And I would just be working up until 4 a.m. on this all the time and taking reference pictures in my kitchen with, the cats wandering around wondering what I was doing. So there's some very interesting pictures of me.
Did the cats make it, the reference pictures of the cats make it in at all?
One of them did. I've hid my cat, Klaus, a few times in the book. You'll have to spot him.
Okay. And you paid Klaus for his work, I assume?
Oh, yes, with treats and stuff.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you don't want to get on the wrong side of that union.
Yeah.
Can I ask about the process? I mean, there's obviously a lot of research that went into this. A lot of it you had growing up. A lot of it was part of, your interest already. But I'm sure that given the level of the history and the timeline and how much you wanted it to be grounded and rooted, you had to do some extensive research. Am I right?
Yes, and I think the good thing too, I thought that I was doing this whole thing wrong until I saw an interview with David McCullough, who did the biography of John Adams and great history books, where he was saying, no, it's not actually a good thing to do all of your research before you sit down to write. The good thing, I didn't know I was doing it right, was you work as you research, because then you're asking questions. And people, as they're reading, are asking questions. So it's good to kind of create the work with an inquiring eye. You don't just research a book and go, I know everything there is to know now I'm going to just tell you. The whole process of the book was me asking questions, and the book grew naturally out of that, because the book just began as I found a play by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow about Giles Corey, this cantankerous farmer in 17th century Salem that was pressed to death in September of 1692, and I had seen a wax museum towering above me when I was a little kid, and I wanted to learn more about him. Longfellow had written not a poem, but a play about him, which is very weird to me, that this poet who did, the Midnight Ride of Paul Revere and the Song of Hiawatha would do not just a play, but a very bleak, dark play, in which this character of Giles Corey was so two-dimensional, more than, I love Longfellow, but not all of his characters are that two-dimensional. But I think he was exercising something when he wrote this character of Giles Corey. So I just sat down and I said, I'd like to draw this. But of course, then while I'm doing it, I go, well, I have material that Longfellow didn't have. I should make it just a little bit more historically accurate, because I'm going through it and I go, well, Giles Corey didn't live on the Ipswich River. He lived in Peabody. All right, well, I'll change that. Well, that didn't happen on this day. There was a few, that happened months later. All right, well, I'll just make it months later. And then over a decade, it became, the more I researched, the more I realized that I had something to say about all of this. And there were certain things that were just irresistible. And so the Longfellow bits got smaller and smaller and smaller. And the actual research and events, which are just so bizarre and crazy. Truth is really stranger than fiction. And there's about 35 or so pages of endnotes to this book, just to have documentation to say, no, this happened. This doesn't come out of my head. This actually happened, as crazy as it is. And the facts are infuriating, of course, and I got very angry while doing it, the fact that this injustice could happen, this atrocity,
And the 35 pages, that I'm sure that there are more than those 35 pages in your general research that you did. How did you choose to use those 35 pages as sort of the proof for the pudding?
Oh, well, it was just a matter of, I would have just a little entry going, this can be found on this document in this collection. And sometimes I would have references and extracts from it just to prove that some of the dialogue was accurate, Because if you read those transcripts, if you read these documents, remember, this isn't the first witch hunt in American history, and it's not the last either, but it is the largest and the best documented. So we have this wealth of documents. And my dear friend Margot Burns They're a linguist and a professor and a historian. They were actually one of the people who first compiled these documents and studied the handwriting to figure out who wrote what.
Oh, wow.
Which opened up a whole new, world of, oh, so-and-so was in the room, It's we have all the documents for the preliminary hearings and questionings and interrogations, the examinations they were called. But the record book for the trials themselves are gone. Those don't exist conspicuously.
Very. I was going to ask about inspirations and influences, and this ties right into that. In addition to things that have impacted you in terms of fiction and culture and things that you may have come up in your life, you obviously had to steep yourself in a lot of historical documentation for this and draw upon multiple resources for that. And were there things, and obviously this is an example, but can you go into more about what you pulled upon, how you sought out first account documents and reconciled with things that contradicted, as you found, with other historical documents, and when you created sort of your canon of what to use, how did you curate that?
It's so hard. It would be so difficult to do a graphic novel about the entire epidemic of fear that took hold of New England in 1692, because there are hundreds and hundreds of people involved in this story. I kind of had to cherry pick. I kind of had to focus mostly on those who were executed. I focused on Giles Corey and Martha Corey, but I also focused on my own ancestor, my own 10th great-grandmother, Mary Esty, who was arrested, and then she was released from prison. She went home, and then 2 days later she was arrested again, and she was one of the last people to be hanged in Salem. So it's a very I chose the things that gripped me. I chose the things that I felt were relevant. There were different things, stories and different people that I took what was irresistible to me and what I knew wouldn't be such a digression from, the story that I'm telling. Because also it's a graphic novel. Like, I am a storyteller. I have to, craft this as a story. And I tried to design all the faces of everybody uniquely so that you could recognize people. They're not just names. Everyone was like named Mary and John. This is periods in New England. Lots of people have just had biblical names, and it's you would get mixed up. Someone named John Proctor from John Parker. Two people. So I wanted to give everybody a very specific look. And growing up loving, caricature artists like Al Hirschfeld or people like that, I kind of learned from an early age that everybody has a very specific look. And if you draw these people as if you are caricaturing real life people, we don't know who these people look like, most of them. So it'll give an air of reportage, an idea that I was there as a fly in the wall,
It is really a striking visual style, and somebody who had a very artistic family growing up. Were you trained by your dad? Were you trained, do you go to lessons or do things in school, or how did you develop your artistic skills and then take those skills and define a specific style to use?
I think everybody draws. I think all kids draw, and then just the ones that don't stop are the ones that go on. I didn't stop because it was the thing that I felt that I was the most useful in, I guess. I felt like it was really the only thing that I could do well.
When did you add writing to that list?
Well, there you go. I don't know. My dad always writes things. My dad self-published a book called The Brewer Brothers. So he always just had a little notebook that he'd always be writing things down. So I guess I monkey see, monkey do. You kind of see people, you see how writing works. The writing process isn't sitting in front of a blank page. It's taking out whatever sheet of paper or napkin you have in your pocket and going, oh shit, I just got an idea. Excuse my French. But how you find your style? You find your style, I think, by just digesting all the work that you love, and you just eat everything up. My influences growing up were Edward Gorey, of course, my hero. Ronald Searle, Ralph Steadman, Tove Jansson, a fellow Finn, Charles Keeping, Al Hirschfeld, a myriad of different pen and ink styles. And what you do when you're looking for your own style is you just treat it like a deli. I'll take some of that, some of this, some of those, and you just embrace the elements of those styles that you love, and you do it yourself. And then just through loving it and doing it and practicing, you develop your own style, and it just becomes part of your voice.
With a family that's clearly very artistically driven, with the personal impact of this book, with everything that you're doing, how does your family feel, and sort of what role do they currently still play in your work and your career and your encouragement and all of your endeavors?
That's funny. I'm still writing things with my dad. We write funny, goofy comedy things all the time together. So this book was kind of a shock to my family, because usually I do very funny, surreal, goofy things. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. I got weirdly obsessed with this.
Furnish the story about your papa said when you were a little kid, you asked your grandpa if he knew any publishers, because you're making a comic book when he was a little kid.
Oh yeah, when I was a little kid, I did ask my grandfather, do you know any publishers? Because all I wanted to be was either an illustrator or an animator. And I went to Cal Arts for animation. But always in the background, I was working on this book and doing other illustrated things as well.
Because you have a wide range. You've got the stop motion, you've got illustration, you've got writing, you've got 2D animation, you've got storyboarding, you've got a little bit of all of these different elements. And maybe does this take all of those and suffuse them into this form from all these different pieces, or is this its own new thing?
This is its own new thing. I mean, it's funny, working on it for a decade, it of course it began so innocently enough, and it became something. If I had told myself 10 years ago that I would be doing a 500 plus page graphic novel, I don't know if I would have went on. It just kind of flowered naturally. This is it's very different from what I've done. It's not a million miles away from what I plan to do afterwards, but as far as, it's different from the animation that I've done. I mean, I did do a stop motion adaptation of The House of the Seven Gables.
Which is beautiful, by the way.
Oh, thank you. It has 2D elements that were reminiscent of what I was doing with this book by that point, even.
A little bit of an evolution into this.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Speaking with you, I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to speak with you. This is our first time meeting, and I'm struck by how much of a charming, happy, almost bubbly person you seem to be, which is a little bit of a juxtaposition when I picked up this book and I started reading it, and I realized, okay, this is a very intriguing book, but it's a heavy, it's a, no pun intended, heavy book.
Yeah.
And it is something that is not exactly lighthearted.
No.
But did you find ways to infuse some of your humor and some of your own quirks into the story in a way that might lighten it up, or is it very much something that is a creature of its origins?
Yeah, I began this book knowing that at some point I would have to draw very dark things, and things that I knew that I had to draw, but they weren't things that I knew that I would take any pleasure in drawing, but they were important. It was important that I would do it. You have to show these things. You have to show. The whole book is hinged upon how terrible and brutish these and just agonizing and slow these people suffered. So what? Humor-wise, I knew that I needed some comedy relief just to be a kind of how do you say, not escape, but a little departure for me. I would draw something very dark or something very heavy, But then I was researching and I said, oh, the comic relief of the book, funny enough, is the governor at the time, Governor William Phipps, who was literally an illiterate treasure hunter who became governor of New England. He came back to New England from London with this new charter. The Massachusetts Bay government had been languishing in legal limbo for over 4 years without a charter. So what was legal and what wasn't was in dispute. And he comes in and he hears tell of there's hundreds of people in prison right now for witchcraft. And he creates an emergency court, the Court of Oyer and Terminer, of questionable legality. And but he was this very much just kind of in over his head, swashbuckling. He just wanted to be up in Maine, fighting the French, fighting indigenous people in a fort. He didn't want to be at his desk. He couldn't read. He had a very short temper. So that was funny enough, that was kind of the comic relief of, here's this guy who is kind of a buffoon in charge of, this court that is ultimately going to cause severe damage.
I'm afraid we're almost out of time. I'll ask my 2 quick wrap-up questions I'd like to ask everyone's, at the end. One is, what would you hope that people would take away with them after finishing this book?
Well, I think that there is kind of a weird divide when people visit Salem. It's kind of a misunderstood city. We have this idea of the Salem witch trials as a kind of mythologized thing, as a kind of made-up thing, a thing that probably didn't happen, a thing that exists only in like New Yorker cartoons with people with buckles on their hats and pitchforks. And of course, I love Salem and I love Halloween. But the weird ways in which the two have been this kind of weird arranged marriage of the two out of just financial, economic desperation more than anything else. Like a lot of people, I walked around that city and I thought, okay, all of this has become kind of a Halloween mecca, but none of this would really be here if 25 innocent people hadn't died. 19 men and women hanged, 1 man pressed to death, and 5 people dying in prison, including a newborn baby. I mean, I don't know how to feel about that. So part of the book, part of this whole decades-long process was me wrestling with that. And how does that make me feel? What is my opinion of that,
And you want the audience or the readers to have that same conversation with you in the book to negotiate those feelings?
Conversation is the right word, because I'm a cartoonist. It's not my job to make people agree with me. It's just my job to make people think or reconsider things in a different light. It's not my job to infuriate or offend people either. It's my job to just say, I'm not going to bullshit you. I'm going to just tell you what happened, tell you how I personally feel about it, and you are free to make of that what you may.
Last question I think we have time for, and this is just a fun one. What was the first comic you either bought, were given, or influenced you in a strong way, or book? Anything that when you came across, you're like, this changed me?
I grew up with Tintin, of course, and Asterix and all the Belgian things. I think the first book, the first comic book that actually showed me like what you can do with comics was Will Eisner's Moby Dick.
Oh, interesting.
Because I grew up loving like the Gregory Peck version of Moby Dick that Ray Bradbury wrote the screenplay for, and the Hallmark version with Patrick Stewart. And I wanted to read it as like a 7-year-old kid. And of course, you look at it on the shelf and it's 3 inches wide. But then I had Will Eisner's Moby Dick that was this thin. And he had compressed all of this information down into these beautiful illustrations. And I felt like I could read great literature through Mr. Eisner. And it showed me what comics can do. And I think it really helped me decide to do this book as a comic book. It's a great medium where you can do anything, and you have a huge canvas. You can tell the story of the Salem witch trials in ways that you can't do in movies or TV shows. You can have all sorts of settings and people and without losing your audience.
Well, thank you so much. The book is More Weight by Ben Wickey, A Salem Story. It is big. It is one of the thicker books. You will have a lot of fun reading it. Well, maybe fun isn't the right word. It's very interesting to read. It'll take a lot of time, and we really appreciate your time, and we look forward to this and everything else you have coming up next.
Thank you so much, Joe.
Thank you.